All right. Welcome, everyone. Another compassionate conversation here. I'm Dawn Fackler, and I'm a grief recovery coach. And Danielle Wolfe has agreed to have a conversation with us. I'll let you introduce yourself and
Sure.
everything you do.
I'm Daniela Wolfe. I'm a full-time LMSW. I've been doing that for about 27 years. So clinically trained in all things stress management, mindfulness, stress management, coping skills. I think I said stress management twice, but as well as then I do coaching and corporate training as a burnout prevention specialist and self-care strategist, helping busy professionals kind of ditch the guilt and overwhelm when it comes to taking the time that they need for themselves and prioritizing their self-care every single day.
Awesome. It sounds like, oh, you can give me some pointers. For those of my friends, colleagues that are healthcare, of course, I do hospice, and that can take a toll on you after a bit.
Oh yeah, that secondary trauma of going through other people's hard situations. It's like the bystander effect from bullying, like studies have shown that you are just as severely affected as the people going through it.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Plus compassion fatigue when you are empathetic and giving for extended periods of time. Again, that doesn't even sense it, but it can wear on you, and that's where then that burnout can show up as cynicism, where it can show up as the detachment from that type of situation. And so there's so many effects when we don't take the time to take care of ourselves as caregivers.
So the whole my family expects me to be nice when they don't pay me. That's kind of a they're not paying me to be nice.
Yeah. Or just even, I don't know about you, but like when I come home from work, I need a minute before I can talk, before I can answer what's for dinner, all those kind of things, I need some time to decompress and kind of recharge myself to be able to show back up for them.
And that's me with working 12-hour shifts on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. When it comes Monday,
Mm-hmm.
I'm useless. I'm
Yeah.
worthless. I don't want to look at anybody or anything. And my boyfriend makes fun of me about not wanting to go out into public.
I have days like that where I'm like, I can't leave the house today. I've been peopling all week and I need
Uh-huh.
a break, but that's why, especially when I talk about self-care, I talk about practical self-care that you can do in small micro moments throughout every single day. Because if you work, 3 days straight and you wait till that day off, you're going to be so spent. You're going to have like zero left in your battery, kind of like if you left your phone uncharged for days at a time. And you need those small little micro moments, could be 1 minute here, 5 minutes there, 10 minutes here, to be able to keep recharged in order to keep going and keep taking care of yourself. So sometimes those days, especially when we don't think we have any time to take a break, those are the days you have to prioritize it.
What are some examples of micro self
Yeah.
care would you give?
When I talk about it, like I said, so many people think about it as like a spa day, a massage, these things that take money and time and big blocks of time. When I talk about self-care, it's really practical. It's everything from how you sleep, how you eat, how you move, how you dress, how you decorate and organize your home, how you connect with others, how you think about money, as well as that traditional personal development like meditation, mindfulness, yoga, being outside, laughter. There's so many different ways. A lot of times I start people with a very simple 1 minute self-care practice that they can do where they set a reminder on their phone to go off, and then they set a timer for 1 minute. And during that time, you're not answering an email, throwing in a little laundry, calling someone back. You're just going to sit for that 1 minute. And maybe you do some box breathing or some other breathing exercises. Maybe you're looking out the window and noticing the things you see outside. Maybe you're shrugging your shoulders, drinking some water, but just for 1 minute, which can feel really long if you're not doing anything else. Studies have shown you start to decrease that stress, decrease those cortisol levels. Physiologically, you start to see a difference, even if at that initial moment you're not like, whoo, it feels like I sleep 8 hours. It's not necessarily that kind of thing. But those micro moments, you do that for 1 minute, and then maybe you set a timer for that to do that 5 times a day. So you've got 1 minute 5 times a day. Not only now do you have a 5 minute self-care practice, but you get the dopamine hit of setting a goal and achieving it. Maybe at the end of 1 minute, you're like, I got 30 seconds more. I've got one more minute. you can bring a coworker along, go for a walk outside. If it's winter, you take some extra steps inside. There's so many different ways you're now connecting with others. You're being intentional with how you're spending your time. And when we have that intention, it builds not only our energy levels, but our confidence. And that energy from our confidence radiates to everybody around us as well. So it doesn't have to be massive moments. You think even to intentionally say, close your eyes, visualize your happy place before going back into a patient's room on a hard day. That 30 seconds, can have a big impact on how you respond then in some of those crisis situations rather than just reacting.
Well, it's like I know a lot of colleagues that if we have 2 minutes, we get on our phones and Facebook, and I'm like that. I don't feel like that's really self-care though.
Right. It could sometimes if you find funny things, again, the physiological piece, that mind body connection. I always like to say, when you think differently, you feel differently. When you feel differently, you act differently. So having that intention behind what you're doing and how you're thinking about what you're doing can be the transformation, though, of beginning to feel differently. If it's just that mindless scrolling going through, but if you're maybe more intentional and you're going to find something funny, something that makes you smile, something that makes you pause, that you then maybe share with your kids or your colleagues or something like that. Now you're connecting. So now you've added laughter, you've added mindfulness, and you've added some connection. And it's those small, then micro stacks of those moments throughout your day that build that broader self-care practice.
Okay.
And then you can always
Now,
set aside other times, like my morning is sacred, my nighttime routine is sacred. The amount of time I have might vary. Some days I might only have 10 minutes, but those 10 minutes are mine. Other days are a little longer. So being intentional with your time when you have it, and really having a plan of what types of things are individual to you as far as what lights you up, what helps motivate you, is going to be kind of what makes the big difference.
like I said, plan. I was actually going to ask, like, with scheduling your day,
Mm-hmm.
write it down and actually schedule in self-care time,
Yep.
meditation time, thinking time, breathing time.
Well, and even I like to schedule intentional buffer time, which either A, could be used for self-care between things going on, or it allows for life to happen so that if something runs over, something happens, and you get a little sidetracked, you're not feeling that stress of, oh my gosh, now I'm late. Now I don't have a second. Now I don't have that moment that I need to transition from one activity to the next. So when you're planning your time and the things you're doing each day, to plan that buffer time between those different activities when you
that
can.
way this that way scheduling doesn't become more of a stressor than a reliever or stress reliever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Journaling, how would you, is it better to do with like guided journal or just randomly write whatever?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, not everybody's a journaler either. And I think sometimes we need to give ourselves the grace to be okay with that, because we think, oh, journaling, it's this calm thing, it's this self-care thing. If you're not a journaler, that's okay. Some people, though, they do like to journal. Some people like prompts. Some people like free flow. Some people like to talk. In general, like when I write, I like to talk a lot of things out because I'm just more verbal in that way, and can work and edit it later. So you can do things, even on your phones, they have voice to text. There's so many different ways that you can do journaling, and really look at what's the point of it. Sometimes, just a simple gratitude journal of listing 3 things you're grateful for each day. So you're writing literally 3 words, 3 lines. That might be all you have to do. It doesn't have to be these elaborate, insightful paragraphs or things like that. Even just starting with, I don't know what to write, but I felt like I should write, might be the beginning of how you start that self-reflection process in whatever way that's going to help you, kind of find what you're looking for. Because sometimes, you don't necessarily want to go down the rabbit hole of everything that happened that day. That might not be the point of it. It's not necessarily a diary. It's about what intention are you looking to gain from it? What insights? How do you want to feel after is part of what you put into it. Sometimes it's mindset work on just maybe changing some of those negative self-talk we have, reading positive affirmations and reflecting on how they make you feel. There's so many different ways to start a journaling practice. There's no wrong way. There's only your way. So be willing to try and fail, be willing to try and be uncomfortable. Part of why they call so many of these things a practice is because it takes practice to ingrain them, to make them yours and make them part of your day-to-day routine.
I love you said it's make journaling, it's your journey. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how I like to say grief, your grief is your journey, it's nobody
Mm-hmm.
else's. Nobody can tell you if it's right or if it's wrong or how to do it.
Right. Like, oh, you should be talking about this. You should
Mhm.
be feeling this way. That if you're not expressing certain emotions, oh, you're just burying them. Everybody has their own way of coping with things. Sometimes it can be, kind of repressing things, but to find your own outlet is what's going to work for you. Some people might not do journaling, but they can ride for miles and miles. That's their meditative process. Meditation doesn't have to, it's a little bit different than journaling, but meditation doesn't have to look a certain way either. People think it has to be quiet and zen and holding your fingers like that or whatever. It doesn't have to be that. It can be walking, it can be talking, it can be listening, it can be riding, running. There's so many different ways to meditate. And again, allowing yourself the grace to do what feels best for you. Don't just do something because it works for me or it works for Dawn. Do something that works for you. Because I think when we try and adopt other people's self-care, it doesn't always feel right. And then we're like, oh, that's not for me. But it just might not be the right thing that you're picking. And because we're all so different and individual, and that's why it doesn't feel right and you don't feel those benefits.
What are some other ideas for self-care?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and some of it, can be done at that moment. Some of it might be more planning. Like when I talk about how you dress or how you decorate and organize your home. Our home is our sanctuary. It's where we start and end our day. So to find a way that your home feels like that comfortable glove, that comfortable place that you can just let your guard down and be yourself. Doesn't mean there's not going to be, if you got little kids like Legos somewhere, clutter, having a space that feels good doesn't mean it has to be clean or Marie Kondo organized or anything like that. Even she said after she had kids, she's like, oh yeah, this doesn't always work, and she let things go too. But kind of finding out what works for you, finding maybe one place in your house that's your chair, your spot, that you have a candle that you like the way it smells, that you have a certain blanket, finding that comfort, colors, scents, music, what you bring in your home, can be part of your daily self-care because you're starting and ending your day there. How you dress, definitely, I think, that's the first thing people see when we walk in the room. And if you're wearing something maybe that's too tight, that you're tugging at, that just doesn't feel right, that's uncomfortable, your confidence is not going to be there. Your energy is going to be different than if you show up wearing something that you're like, yeah, I know this fits me and looks good. And so that might take a little pre-planning maybe on a certain day, but to have clothes that you feel good and confident in, that you enjoy the way they look on you, is going to be part of that self-care that you bring into the room. Because self-care isn't, like I said, just about feeling calm. It's about your confidence and it's about your energy, and keeping your energy up is part of your self-care. And so that confidence is going to bring that energy to the room. So that could be some different ways to integrate self-care, on a bigger spectrum, not just at those little micro moments, but they all work together. So when I teach it and we teach, I work with clients and we look at those 8 different pillars I mentioned, they almost work together like a wheel flowing throughout your day, and so being well-rounded in those different areas, and it could look different for every person, but having those different areas helps you feel that flow each day and find balance. And when I talk about balance, it's how you, not about everything being equal, because that's just not possible, but balance comes from how you're able to adapt and pivot and have resilience and have those boundaries, and so then you look at your self-care fitting within that balance of, oh, today I'm running a little bit late, so I can't maybe go for a walk with a friend, but I can do this as a self-care. I have different options. I have the ability to adapt and pivot my self-care, as well as I can adapt my life because I have those buffer zones in my schedule. I can adapt my mindset because I've learned how to think differently. So there's so many different ways to integrate them. And a lot of times it feels like common sense. People are like, I get this. I've heard these things. I know this, right? But the actual implementation is where we can get stuck if we don't take the time to really be intentional with what we're doing. And sometimes we need that outside perspective to have someone help us see what's working for us, what's not working for us, as well as to come up with the different options that we just haven't thought of yet.
Well, and that was what I was going to say, because I sit and think about when my daughter was little and I worked full time, single mom, going to school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had no time to
Mm-hmm.
think or even do anything. It was study, work, kid, study, work, kid. So
Yeah.
any suggestions for someone in that situation? I've
Yeah.
gotten through it now, but
And same when my kids were little, I was divorced, single mom, and some of it actually I learned to bring them with me because honestly, that's how they started to learn about self-care. We talked about it. They were part of my burnout story, but they were also part of my journey into taking care of myself. And now that they're older, in their early 20s kind of thing, we've talked about what they do now to take care of themselves, how they manage their stress, how they prioritize what they need. And it's because of they saw me doing it. They saw, they do what we do and not what we say. They saw me taking the time to go to the gym. They saw me taking some space for myself. One time I remember I came home from work and my son had to be in middle school and he had this little tray. He was so cute. He had made me homemade hummus. He had some chips on it and he had
aw,
a glass of water and a fancy glass. And he's like, Mom, you've had a really stressful week. You need to slow down and take some time. And I was like, oh my gosh, they are learning these things because we're their model of not only how we should be treated, but how they need to treat themselves at some point. So definitely any moms, parents out there, for yourself, even when you were younger, bring your kids with you. It can be, they can do stretching with you. They can come laugh with you. They can breathe with you. They can, learn the things that you're learning, or at least even explain why you're doing this. I'm taking a minute because, and when you do those things repeatedly, that becomes part of their habits too.
that's I never thought. Yeah, I never really would have thought of doing that.
And
I'm gonna
honestly, when
read
they start to learn them too, it can help your self-care because they then again will give you that space.
because I remember there was when I was going through nursing school and we got home. It had been a rough week for me, and my daughter was like 2, and she stood there and cried and says, "I want my nana." I said, "I do too. Get in the car." So we went to my mom.
Mm-hmm.
um, so yeah, that's definitely something for young moms. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my kids know, once I'm in bed and the book comes out, they're like, oh, that's my quiet time. Not that I'm not available, but that I'm taking a couple minutes for myself.
when putting it, if you incorporate them into it, I feel like that relieves some of that mom guilt.
Yeah, yeah. I have this free resource on my website. It's called the Reclaim Your Time in 10-Minute Blocks cheat sheet. And it has 10 ways to, either occupy your kids, or it has then over 20 ideas of what to do with 10 minutes or less that you could even do with your kids. And, maybe it's coloring. Coloring is a great meditative, mindful activity. You can do so many different things together. So if you're looking for some ideas, that's out there as well.
Well, that's what I was going to say. What is your website? So,
Yep. It's best D as in Daniela, D, bestdlife.com.
and I'll make sure to put that on my webpage too. So that
Mm-hmm.
way I'll put it in the bio when I put this on my webpage. Well, like I said, coloring.
Yep.
I color a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I had somebody look at me once and say, "You color? Like, that's a kid thing." I'm like, "Mm-mm, that's an adult thing."
Yeah. Even, you think of so many artistic things or creative things that as kids, they just rush and do them, not worrying about if they're good at it or anything like that. And as adults, sometimes we pull away from things that we don't think we're good at necessarily, or we're afraid to try new things because we're not going to be good, as opposed to giving ourselves the time to practice, but just to do things you enjoy, have that silly dance night in the kitchen as you're making dinner. My kids, we would do like Motown music on Monday, Taco Tuesday. We had like different themes that we would incorporate then into meals, and incorporating them in, including that, whether they picked the music, they helped, with the meal, those kind of things. So that connection, all those kind of pieces then layer it once you start kind of adding different pieces of it.
Parents of teenagers now.
Yeah. Who don't want to even pretend you exist until later on in life, like they just magically came about.
Yes. Because I mean, high school and middle school now it's awful. Like
Hmm.
these kids are going through so much.
Yeah, anxiety is high, resilience, coping skills are low. It's tough right now.
So I even kind of wonder how can parents help
Hmm.
with that when the child doesn't want to listen to you.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's about listening to them. And that can be hard. As a social worker, it's so much easier sometimes for me to listen than as a mom. My kids, they'll be like, you don't talk like this to your kids. I'm like, yeah, like I need that reminder sometimes, like to just listen and hear what they have to say and what they're thinking, because that might give a different perspective than what we assume or think the problem is. So just listening, they have a lot of feelings, a lot of big feelings, and they don't know how to manage them, which is why we see a lot of behaviors, or we see the shutdown because it's embarrassing. And I think, just whether it's mental health, mental wellness, normalizing just talking about feelings. We all have minds, so we all have mental health, is how I like to think about it. But just normalizing those conversations, normalizing being uncomfortable rather than avoiding anything that makes us uncomfortable. Normalize being uncomfortable and working through it and breaking it down to make it manageable. There was a quote by Mr. Rogers, I'm probably going to butcher, but it's, about being human is manageable. If we can make everything that we think we're feeling and going through human, we can make it manageable.
I know kind of, and I have over the years learned just for myself, my own self-care, I tell myself, like if I'm getting ready to do something, I'm like, oh, that'll make me look stupid or that'll make me look silly. And I finally got to telling it to my daughter too. I said, what other people think of you is not your business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it takes them a while to learn that, especially as teens. They assume everybody's as focused on them as they are. And so it can be hard to get them outside of that. Volunteering with teens is great. It's a great way to teach teens empathy. Whether it's being with younger kids, they say like baby therapy is the best way to teach teens empathy. But, being with animals, volunteering is how they can start to get some of that perspective and be able to at least be a little bit outside of themselves and their own kind of stresses and issues and that type of thing. So that might be a way that doesn't involve you, because they can do it with other kids and whatnot, but it can give them that outlet to start to feel good and start to feel like they are making a difference and like they matter.
Like just small acts of service
Mm-hmm.
to help
Yeah.
them get through it.
There's a lot of great like youth boards in different towns and things like that to get involved. A lot of high schools, I don't know about by you, but like here they require community service as part of high school as it is. So it's a great way, for them just to start getting in that practice.
Well, and I know like, well, here we actually have in Madison, we have a suicide prevention group
Mm-hmm.
and it's a nonprofit and they put together boxes
Yeah.
of things, whether it's a note from someone telling you you matter or just things to help deal with stress. And so when
Yeah.
they get that phone call that somebody is having a rough time, not only are they there to talk to them, they have something to give to them.
Mm-hmm. No, that's
And
great.
I know they are trying to work their way into the high school too.
Yep, I'm actually the advisor for our high school's mental health awareness committee, and it was students wanted to start this. It's student driven. They really do have a lot of ideas about what they need and how to manage that stress. And again, just that listening piece. Sometimes ideas that as an adult, I'm like, oh, our kid's going to do that, and it takes off, and I'm like, wow, they really do know their people.
Maybe we should listen a little more.
Yeah. Because I'm forgetting how old I am sometimes, and I'm like, oh yeah, I am just that old.
I'm not that old yet.
I know.
Just because my music's in the grocery store doesn't mean I'm old.
Yeah, even though I think all my fashion's coming back around again, so I'm okay with that.
That's right. Um, for those in healthcare, because like you said, it's the second we grieve as much as they do.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
And I never realized it until I got into it. Like for me, I don't think about it when I'm in it.
Hmm.
And so for me to think, oh, I need to do self care, I've just in like the last year really thought, and I've been intentional with doing things for myself.
Right.
How can someone notice when they're getting into burnout?
Definitely, that I know a lot more programs in those fields, mental health, nursing, are teaching, self-preservation, self-care, self-love, because when we go in there, it can be easy to get caught up in the clinical. This goes here, this is this. And when you leave, the emotional part is what comes out with you. And so, recognizing if you start to feel detached, and granted, there's a healthy level of separation from your clients, that you need sometimes, or else it just stays with you all the time. But if you're completely detached, where it starts to affect your empathy, if you start feeling cynical, and it can be like that in some settings sometimes, where it's like, oh, this and this, and you lose a little bit of that compassion, um, you know, thinking like you just don't want to be there, the dread, all that kind of stuff. There's an analogy when I talk about the difference between stress and burnout. Stress is like being in front of a bonfire and you keep putting logs in front of it, and that fire is roaring. You can feel the heat, it's getting bigger and bigger. Burnout is those ashy embers after, that are just kind of like falling off. There's a little smoke. Maybe you can get some orange flames if you fan it, but for the most part, that heat, that fire is gone. And that's what happens to your motivation when you get burnt out. That's what happens, where you have put too much into the fire, where it burnt itself out. So taking some steps back, taking intentional time throughout your day, every single day, is going to help keep it just a warm, active fire where you're able to keep going, keep burning, kind of what you need to do, versus just burning out, where you've thrown everything of yourself into it and have nothing left for yourself or anybody else.
Okay. You mentioned box breathing.
Mm-hmm.
Can you show us how to do that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And actually, a lot of times when it comes to breathing, sometimes we can trigger things if we don't do it right. Because when we take, say, a deep breath, we're like, and that's our body signal, like we're going to go run, we're going to, do something, we're escaping something. And so that can activate fight or flight and anxiety. But if we do it more, I almost like to think of, imagine you're blowing bubbles, because you can't blow bubbles fast or they pop. To imagine you're blowing out candles on a birthday cake. So you want your exhale to be longer than your inhale. So when you do box breathing, you're going to do it in counts of 4. Like I said, do my last count as 6. So you're going to inhale for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I like to exhale for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you hold for another 4 before you take your next breath. And so it's not like, and that's not the kind of breathing that's going to help calm you down. So to keep it kind of slow and steady, you can trace maybe even just a square on your leg, on your lap, on a piece of paper that you're in front of. Is going to help you as well, kind of again create some of that meditative, mindful awareness of just being present. Because they always say you can't take a past breath, you can't take a future breath, you can only take a present breath. And so it can be really grounding to just do that box breathing, maybe 2 or 3 cycles. How many? I don't even know. Was that like a minute and a half? I'm horrible with math. So we had 6.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. So we had like 18, 20 seconds per box. So 20 times 3 is 60. So it was like a
There you
minute.
go.
Yeah.
I'm a nurse. I should be able to do that, but I had to think for a minute.
I'm a social worker. I really don't do math. My husband's an engineer. I'm like, honey, what's this?
I like the whole, I pull out my phone and I start using my calculator.
Mm-hmm.
As far as someone who is, because I start to think about someone who's grieving
Mm-hmm.
and they're in that spot where they are reaching out for help. So
Yeah.
they need someone, they can't, basically, they're unable to do the self care themselves. They need someone to help tell them how to do self care.
Mm-hmm.
How would you approach self-care with them?
Um, Simple, regardless, of what stage of grief they're in. Always start small and simple. We don't always like to do hard. So setting a simple goal of, depending on what they're doing, even if it's as simple as getting out of bed and taking a shower that day, getting out of bed and just changing into even during the pandemic, we'd say from your bed pajamas to your couch pajamas, like looking out the window or taking a small walk outside, depending on what they need from their self-care. Maybe it is connecting, maybe it is they've stopped eating or they're eating too much, like depending on what area has been most affected during their grief or that they're turning to some negative habits in, would be where you might start, but still start small and simple. Don't make it the big goal of, all right, you're going to go back to work and you're going to do this and this, because that can be really overwhelming. When even like we have students that are coming back after being out of school for a while, we don't send them straight to class, stay in our office for a little bit, have your teachers come down and see you, like start reconnecting maybe with your coworkers slowly, because it can be hard coming back, especially to work after a loss. You've got all these people asking you, want to talk to you, retelling your story. And it's okay to put those boundaries in place too. Send an email, even like, I know everybody cares about me. Thank you so much. I'm not comfortable talking about it right now. Just so you know, when I come back, I'm not going to want to share, or however you can word it, in the way that's most comfortable for you. But it's okay to put boundaries in place. Or when you come home after work, I'm not going to talk to anybody else today, and that's when I'm going to invest in myself, or I'm going to, whatever rituals you want to create to help nurture and take care of the part of you that needs to be taken care of is where you start.
I think my main thing from all of this is nothing's wrong.
Mm-hmm. There's no
Anything
wrong way
you
to approach
try
this.
is okay. It may work for you, it may not, but don't compare, again, don't compare your journey to someone else's.
Yeah, don't not take action. Always take some action, even if it's the wrong action. It tells you what direction to start going in.
And that I want to make sure everybody realizes they're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
many people are going through the same thing, but everybody's, like we talked about on your podcast, everybody's scared to talk about grief.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to normalize it.
Yeah.
And I feel like it needs to be, because it's part of everyday life.
Oh, yeah, and it can be grieving so many different things, whether it's the loss of a person, the loss of expectations, the loss of a relationship. There's so many different parts of life that we can grieve. The loss of our youth, the loss of, and it's okay to acknowledge those things. It's okay to say, I miss that. Like I love my adult kids, but I miss sometimes that little kid that like I was their world. Now it's like I'm scheduled in and planned just like everybody else. I can be present and still miss certain things. You can still grieve those other parts of your life and those other people while still being present.
And that's normal too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think we've covered quite a bit,
Yeah.
unless there's anything else you can think of.
No, definitely grace, give yourself grace. Like you said, Don, there's no wrong way. There's no time frame on this. It's not like, oh, it's been 6 months, 6 weeks, a year. There's no time frame on grief. And to just allow yourself that space to do what you need, listen to yourself, because it's going to look different every single day. You might go a week solid and be like, all right, I got this. And then you smell something, you hear something, and it can trigger feelings that you thought you were already worked through. And that's okay. That doesn't mean you're back at square one. That doesn't mean you failed. That doesn't mean anything other than you had a memory. You felt something. You thought something. Now, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to unpack and stay there? Or are you going to find a way now to keep working through?
And I think that's a big thing with grief recovery is that self-care. You got to
Mm-hmm.
work through your grief. Don't shove it down for later.
Yeah. It'll always come back up.
Yeah, neither don't shove it down and don't just ignore it, because it will always be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And definitely the isolation allows it to grow and gives it power and strength. All those, the negative feelings, the negative thoughts, the more you let them out, the more you take their power away.
I like that.
Mhm.
And the more, and the more of an army you have, because you have other people to help you fight.
Oh my gosh, as soon as you start sharing, that's when you get so many of those Me Too moments. A long time ago, I had a miscarriage 25 years ago. And, until I talked about it, until it happened, all of a sudden out of the woodwork, so many people I knew, family members that I'd known my whole life. Oh my gosh, me too. Yes, when I have this, and it's like you definitely find that connection through shared experiences. So definitely, don't let grief isolate you.
It's like everybody's just waiting for somebody to say something.
Mm-hmm.
Be
Yeah.
that person that says it.
Yeah.
Not just think it, say it. Well, thank you so much, so very much. And I'll let your website and I'll have all that put on my page too. Um,
Great.
Tell me it again. I know D.
Yep. It's bestdlife.com. So that's my website. You'll have access to my podcast, my blog posts, my free resources. Follow me on social media and ask me any questions you have.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And I'll stop the recording.